Elijah had always been different from most of the kids at his school. He wasn't flashy or loud, and he didn't wear the expensive clothes that so many students seemed to care about. He came from a modest family, and while they had always supported him, he knew he didn't quite fit in with the group of wealthy students who ruled the social scene. But Elijah didn't mind. He had something they didn't: focus, determination, and a love for learning that burned brighter than any designer label. Every morning, he walked into the school carrying his backpack filled with books. He spent hours reading and studying, always pushing himself to learn more. Teachers often noticed his intelligence, his curiosity, and the way he could solve problems other students struggled with. Yet no matter how well he did in class, he couldn't escape the attention of the rich kids who saw him as an easy target. It started with small things at first: a snide comment in the hallway, a whispered joke when he walked past, or an exaggerated laugh whenever he answered a question in class. Elijah tried to ignore it. He told himself that these kids didn't matter, that their opinions didn't define him. But over time, the teasing grew bolder, louder, and more personal. One group of students, led by a boy named Carter, seemed determined to make Elijah's life miserable. Carter was the kind of kid who had never been told no in his life. Everything he wanted, he got: money, attention, and influence. He used these advantages to make others feel small, and Elijah had become his favorite target. Carter and his friends would often corner him in the hallways, block his way, or make cruel jokes about his clothes and his background. "You really think you belong here?" Carter sneered one morning, leaning against the lockers with a smug smile. His friends snickered behind him. "This isn't your world, nerd. Maybe you should go back to where you came from." Elijah didn't respond. He just kept walking, pretending not to hear, though his heart pounded in his chest. He knew reacting would only give them more fuel, but it didn't make the words hurt any less. He felt the weight of isolation every day. While other kids hung out in groups, laughed together, or shared stories about their weekends, Elijah often ate lunch alone. He would sit in the corner of the cafeteria, books open, focusing on something that transported him far from the harsh reality of the school. Despite the bullying, Elijah had a secret that none of the rich kids knew about. Outside of school, he had trained in martial arts for years. His mother had encouraged him to join a local gym when he was little, thinking it would help him build confidence and discipline. At first, Elijah had been hesitant. He wasn't naturally athletic, and the other kids in the gym were much stronger. But he stuck with it. Day after day, he practiced punches, kicks, and defensive moves. Slowly, he grew stronger, faster, and more confident in himself. This skill became his quiet strength, something that gave him control when everything else at school felt out of control. Elijah didn't train to fight people for fun. He trained to protect himself and to build discipline. But the irony was, the very thing he kept hidden from the bullies would one day turn the tables in a way no one could have expected. At school, though, the bullying escalated. Carter and his friends started planning public humiliations. They would make jokes in front of entire classes, spread rumors, and even create fake social media accounts to mock him. Every day felt like a new challenge just to get through the halls without being humiliated. But Elijah had learned a secret strategy: patience. He kept his head down, stayed out of their way, and waited for the right moment to stand up. Not just for himself, but in a way that mattered. Despite the stress, Elijah's mind never wandered far from his studies. He had dreams, big dreams. He wanted to go to a top university, become a scientist, and make a difference in the world. He knew that the opinions of Carter and his friends were temporary, but the knowledge he gained and the discipline he built would last a lifetime. Even when alone, Elijah found comfort in small things: a quiet walk in the park after school, reading a new book in his room, or practicing moves from his martial arts training. These moments reminded him that he had power in ways the bullies could never understand. While they relied on wealth and intimidation, Elijah had skill, knowledge, and resilience. Some days the bullying felt unbearable. He would go home feeling angry, frustrated, and sad, unsure why people could be so cruel. But his mother always reminded him that strength isn't just about fighting back. It's about staying true to yourself and rising above negativity. One day, she told him, people will see your worth, and when they do, they'll regret every harsh word they ever said. School events like assemblies or sports games became opportunities for Carter and his friends to make Elijah feel smaller. They would whisper comments, laugh at his clothes, or try to trip him in the hallways. Even teachers, while noticing some of the teasing, often didn't realize the full scope of the bullying. Elijah learned to navigate it quietly, using his intelligence and patience to survive each day. Yet despite all the teasing, there were small signs of hope. Some students quietly admired him, though they were too shy to show it. A few classmates would leave him encouraging notes or smile when he answered a tough question in class. These small gestures reminded Elijah that not everyone was cruel, and that his efforts mattered. He also formed a few friendships outside of the mainstream school social scene. Kids from different backgrounds who shared his interests in science, books, or martial arts became his true friends. They didn't care about wealth, clothes, or popularity. They valued character, intelligence, and dedication. With them, Elijah felt a sense of belonging that the rich kids could never take away. As the weeks passed, the bullying reached a breaking point. Carter and his friends seemed more aggressive, more desperate to assert control. They started planning something big, a public confrontation that would humiliate Elijah in front of the whole school. It was clear they didn't realize how much Elijah had grown, both mentally and physically. Elijah, however, remained calm. He understood that every action had a consequence, and that patience and preparation could turn even the toughest situations in his favor. Deep down, he knew that his moment to respond would come, and when it did, it wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about showing strength, dignity, and control. Every night he reviewed his training in his mind, thinking about how he would move, how he would stay calm, and how he would protect himself without losing his integrity. He understood that the upcoming challenge wasn't just a physical one. It was about standing up for himself in a world that often underestimated him. Even though fear lingered, it was mixed with determination. Elijah reminded himself that he had faced challenges before, both big and small, and each one had made him stronger. The bullying had tried to define him, but he refused to let it. He knew that true power came from discipline, knowledge, and self-respect, not wealth, status, or cruelty. At school, the whispers continued. Carter and his friends were plotting, unaware of the storm they had set in motion. Elijah walked the halls with quiet confidence, his mind focused on learning, growing, and preparing for whatever came next. He didn't need anyone else to validate him. He knew his worth. And while the other students laughed at him, mocked him, and tried to push him down, Elijah held on to something stronger: his patience, his skill, and his unshakable belief in himself. Little did anyone know, the very qualities they dismissed would soon turn into a force that no one could ignore. A lesson in respect that would leave the school and the bullies stunned. Elijah's story at this point was still just beginning. The days of isolation, the whispers in the hallways, and the cruel jokes were all pieces of a bigger journey. One that would test him, challenge him, and ultimately show that strength isn't just about fighting, it's about being true to yourself, standing tall when others try to tear you down, and proving that dignity and perseverance always win in the end. The day that changed everything started like any other, but nobody at school knew that a single moment would turn Elijah's life upside down. It was during lunch, when the cafeteria was buzzing with students talking, laughing, and rushing to grab their food. Elijah sat at his usual table in the corner, quietly eating and reading a book, trying to ignore the laughter and whispers from the other side of the room. Carter and his friends were there, smirking and whispering to each other as if plotting something new. It didn't take long for their plan to unfold. As Elijah got up to get more water, Carter stepped in front of him, blocking his way with that smug grin he wore like armor. "Where do you think you're going, nerd?" he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The other students snickered. Carter's friends joined in, circling around Elijah like sharks, their eyes full of anticipation for a scene. Elijah felt the familiar knot of tension in his stomach. He knew he could ignore them, walk away, and avoid trouble, but this time Carter was pushing it too far. He shoved Elijah slightly, enough to make him stumble. "You think you can just walk around here without anyone noticing you?" "Not on my watch," Carter shouted, drawing more attention. Something inside Elijah snapped, not out of anger, but out of control and self-defense. Years of martial arts training, hours of discipline, and moments of quiet practice all came together in a fraction of a second. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he knew he had to protect himself. With precise movements, he sidestepped Carter's push, used a controlled maneuver to create distance, and held his ground. Calm, but ready. Carter lunged again, but Elijah was faster. He blocked the push and guided him to the side without striking, keeping it all controlled. The other students were frozen, staring in shock. They had never seen Elijah like this. For years he had been quiet, gentle, and seemingly defenseless. Now he moved with confidence, skill, and focus. It wasn't about fighting, it was about control. One of the students holding a phone realized what was happening and started recording. In moments, the simple self-defense maneuver became a viral clip. The cafeteria was filled with gasps, whispers, and some laughter. But the video captured something bigger than a small school incident. It showed a young man standing up for himself in a calm, controlled way against bullying. As the video spread, it didn't just reach students in the school. Social media exploded with clips of Elijah's skill and confidence. Comments poured in from strangers praising his composure and bravery. Some called him a hero. Others marveled at how disciplined he looked under pressure. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about showing that self-respect and preparation could change everything. Meanwhile, Carter and his friends were stunned. They had expected to dominate the situation, to humiliate Elijah, and instead they were the ones frozen on camera. Their smug expressions disappeared as realization sank in. For the first time, the bullies weren't in control. The power dynamic that had defined the cafeteria for months had shifted in an instant, and everyone could see it. Elijah, though, stayed calm. He knew the attention could grow dangerous if he let it. He didn't seek fame or revenge. His goal had always been to protect himself and stand tall, yet with every share, like, and comment online, more people saw the strength and discipline that he had developed in silence. His patience, training, and perseverance were now visible to the world. In the days following the incident, Elijah noticed a change at school. Students who once ignored him or whispered insults now gave him space, respect, or even cautious smiles. Teachers, who had previously seen him as quiet and studious, began to recognize his presence differently. The bullies, on the other hand, were increasingly on edge. They faced not only peer judgment but also concern from teachers and administrators who had seen the viral video. Elijah's parents noticed the sudden attention too. They had always encouraged him to stay focused on his studies and martial arts, never imagining that one day the discipline he had built quietly at home and in the gym would gain worldwide recognition. They were proud, but they also reminded him to stay humble. "People will talk, Elijah," his father said. "But what matters is who you are when no one is watching." Even as the video spread, Elijah returned to his routines. He continued attending classes, studying diligently, and practicing martial arts in the evenings. The attention was exciting, but he didn't let it define him. For him, the real victory was the respect he had earned for staying true to himself in a difficult situation. The viral moment also began opening doors he had never imagined. A local news outlet reached out to feature his story, highlighting not just the fight but the courage, self-discipline, and intelligence that had guided him. Interviews with the school and teachers revealed a deeper story. This was a student who had faced persistent bullying, yet refused to let it define him. Elijah's story resonated with many people, especially young students who had been bullied themselves. Messages came from strangers across the country, thanking him for showing that standing up for yourself didn't mean being violent. It meant having confidence, skill, and dignity. Parents praised him as a role model, while teachers used the video to discuss bullying, self-control, and discipline in the classroom. Back at school, the bullies were struggling. Carter, who had once seemed untouchable, now had to face ridicule and embarrassment. Students whispered about how the video had shown his cruelty, and parents demanded answers from the school administration. Some of his friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone publicly humiliated. For the first time, Carter realized that power built on fear and intimidation could crumble in a single moment. Elijah, however, didn't gloat. He didn't post the video himself or boast about the attention. He quietly continued with his life, focusing on his studies and the martial arts that had kept him grounded. He understood something important. Respect could be gained in many ways, but the most lasting respect came from humility and discipline, not showing off or seeking revenge. Even as fame grew online, Elijah kept perspective. Social media likes and shares were temporary, but the lessons he had learned, the patience he had practiced, and the skill he had developed were permanent. Every message of support, every comment praising him reminded him that the right path had been to stay true to himself all along. The incident also sparked conversations among students. Many began to reflect on their own behavior and the ways they treated others. Teachers noticed a shift, too, as discussions about kindness, empathy, and respect became more frequent in classrooms. Elijah's courage had inadvertently become a catalyst for positive change in the school. Despite all the attention, Elijah remained humble. He practiced his martial arts with the same dedication, studied his books with the same focus, and treated everyone with the same quiet dignity. He didn't see himself as a hero. He simply saw himself as someone who refused to let fear control his life. As the days went by, the initial excitement of the viral video began to settle, but the effects lingered. Students no longer saw Elijah as an outsider. They saw him as someone capable, disciplined, and confident. The bullies, on the other hand, were left to reflect on their choices, learning a hard lesson about the consequences of cruelty. Elijah's life didn't change overnight in every way, but the viral moment marked a turning point. He had faced the bullies, stood up for himself without losing control, and shown the world that discipline and courage could triumph over intimidation. For him, the real victory was internal, the knowledge that he could handle life's challenges with skill, patience, and integrity. And while the attention online continued to grow, Elijah focused on what mattered most: learning, growing, and preparing for the future he dreamed of. The video was only a moment, but the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. It was proof that even in the face of bullying and adversity, one person could make a stand, not through anger but through calm, controlled strength, and unwavering self-respect. Elijah's story was far from over. The viral video was only the beginning. A spark that would ignite change not only in his school but in the way people saw him, the bullies, and the power of quiet courage. He had turned a moment of potential humiliation into a lasting example of resilience, showing that true strength isn't about fighting. It's about standing tall, staying disciplined, and letting your character speak for itself. After the video of Elijah defending himself went viral, the atmosphere at school changed completely. The hallways that once echoed with whispers and laughter aimed at him now felt different. Students who had laughed at him before looked unsure. Some avoided eye contact, while others quietly admired the calm confidence he had shown. The bullies, especially Carter, felt the shift most intensely. Their usual power and control were gone, replaced by embarrassment, tension, and the harsh light of public scrutiny. It started slowly. Teachers began to take notice of how the bullying had escalated before the viral incident. Reports came from students who had quietly watched the confrontations over the months, describing what had happened in detail. Administration meetings were held, and the school principal, usually strict but fair, realized that this was more than a simple lunchroom squabble. This was a pattern of bullying that had been allowed to continue unchecked, and now the world outside the school was watching. Carter and his friends were called in for meetings. They tried to act confident to maintain their usual arrogance, but it didn't work. The principal laid out the facts clearly, showing the video and explaining how their actions had consequences not just within the school, but on a broader level. Their parents were notified, and suddenly, the private world of wealthy students that they had always relied on as a shield was no longer protective. Outside eyes, teachers, parents, and even strangers online were judging their behavior. Elijah, meanwhile, remained focused on his own life. He didn't seek revenge or celebration. He continued attending his classes, completing assignments, and practicing his martial arts after school. He understood that the real power he held wasn't in the viral video itself, but in the discipline, patience, and confidence he had built over years. The incident had given him visibility, yes, but it hadn't changed who he was or what he valued. Despite this, the ripple effects were undeniable. Other students who had once stood silently on the sidelines began to speak up against bullying. Some reached out to Elijah, apologizing for not supporting him sooner or admitting they had felt too scared to intervene. He accepted these gestures graciously, using them as opportunities to encourage empathy, patience, and kindness.
He
spoke quietly to his peers about his experience, emphasizing that facing challenges calmly and with dignity was more powerful than responding with anger. Social media attention continued to grow. Local news outlets reached out to interview Elijah, highlighting his intelligence, composure, and martial arts training. They framed his story not as a fight or conflict, but as an example of courage, self-respect, and standing up against bullying. His face and story were shared widely, inspiring messages from across the country. Young students wrote to him, sharing their own struggles and expressing gratitude for his example. Parents praised him as a model for resilience. Even some teachers who had only ever seen him as a quiet student now treated him with deeper respect. Carter, on the other hand, faced an entirely different reality. He and his friends were scrutinized at every turn. Teachers no longer tolerated casual insults or whispers, and students avoided them or whispered behind their backs. Parents demanded explanations and accountability. The sense of invincibility that had allowed them to act cruelly for years was gone, replaced by shame, uncertainty, and the reality that their actions had consequences. Some of the bullies tried to regain their social dominance. They whispered jokes, tried to intimidate smaller students, and even attempted to minimize Elijah's influence. But the power had shifted. Students who had once been afraid to speak up now felt emboldened, inspired by Elijah's example. Teachers were more vigilant, and the administration implemented new policies to address bullying, making it clear that no student would be allowed to dominate others through fear. Elijah's influence continued to grow in unexpected ways. In the classrooms, he became a source of inspiration for peers, not just for standing up to bullies, but for his dedication to learning. Students who had ignored him before now sought his advice on schoolwork, respected his opinion in discussions, and included him in study groups. Even students who had previously been dismissive were surprised by his patience and humility. He didn't flaunt his skills or fame. He simply lived with integrity, showing that true respect comes from character. At home, Elijah's parents watched these changes with pride. They had always encouraged him to focus on his studies and martial arts, never imagining that these quiet efforts would lead to such recognition. They reminded him to stay grounded, to continue being kind and humble, and to use his experiences to inspire others. "It's not about being famous," his mother said. "It's about showing the world who you are and what you value." Elijah also noticed changes in the way the bullies treated him after the incident. Carter, who had always been loud and aggressive, seemed quieter, unsure of himself. His friends, too, seemed to lose some of their confidence. Some attempted awkward apologies, but Elijah didn't rush to accept them. He understood that respect was earned, not given, and that lessons learned through reflection often carried the most weight. The bullies' social circle began to fracture. Friends who had once laughed along with their cruelty started distancing themselves, uncomfortable with the public embarrassment and the scrutiny from both the school and online audiences. Carter's sense of superiority diminished as he realized that wealth and status were no shields against accountability. The experience became a wake-up call for him, showing that treating others cruelly could backfire in ways he had never imagined. Elijah, meanwhile, remained humble. He focused on his studies, martial arts, and the friendships that truly mattered. He had learned that strength wasn't about showing off or asserting dominance. It was about self-control, patience, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth. Even as the video continued to circulate online, he didn't let it define him. He understood that real life was about the choices you made every day, not the attention of strangers. The school environment also began to shift in positive ways. Teachers encouraged students to discuss bullying openly, emphasizing empathy, respect, and the importance of standing up for oneself. Students were reminded that actions have consequences, and that kindness and understanding are powerful tools in creating a supportive community. Elijah's story became a reference point in these discussions, showing how one person's courage could inspire meaningful change. For many students, Elijah's example was transformative. Some who had been quietly struggling with bullying themselves found courage to speak up or seek help. Others who had been bystanders learned the importance of supporting peers rather than staying silent. His influence extended far beyond the viral video, affecting the culture of the school in ways that Carter and his friends could not control. Elijah also continued to grow personally. He balanced the attention and opportunities with the discipline that had always guided him. Martial arts remained a constant, a practice that reminded him of patience, focus, and humility. His academic performance continued to improve, as he understood that knowledge and skill were the foundations of long-term success. Even when faced with continued challenges, Elijah remained steadfast. Some students still tried subtle acts of cruelty, but he met them with calm, composed responses, often turning potential conflict into lessons of respect and patience. The bullies, now aware that their previous tactics no longer worked, became cautious and reflective, slowly learning that intimidation and cruelty were not paths to true respect or influence. Elijah's parents encouraged him to share his experiences, helping him understand the impact his story could have on others. He began speaking to small groups, sharing how discipline, self-respect, and patience could overcome bullying. His message was simple: strength comes from within, not from money, status, or the ability to hurt others. This human-centric approach resonated deeply with both students and adults, reinforcing the lessons already unfolding at school. By the end of this period, the school culture had subtly but significantly shifted. Students treated each other with more care, teachers were more attentive to signs of bullying, and the bullies were learning hard lessons about consequences and accountability. Elijah's calm courage had become a catalyst for broader change, proving that even one person acting with integrity could influence the world around them. The viral video was no longer just a clip online. It had become a symbol. It represented the power of self-respect, the importance of patience, and the impact of quiet courage. Elijah had taken a moment that could have been humiliating and transformed it into an opportunity to inspire, educate, and shift the balance of respect in his school community. Through it all, Elijah remained humble. He didn't seek attention or validation. He continued to study, practice martial arts, and nurture genuine friendships. He understood that life was not about proving power over others, but about mastering oneself, showing kindness, and standing tall in the face of challenges. The bullies' regret, the students' admiration, and the teachers' respect were natural byproducts of his integrity, not goals he had pursued. By this stage, it was clear that Elijah's journey was about more than a viral moment. It was about a young man using his discipline, patience, and quiet strength to influence his environment positively, to teach lessons of respect and courage, and to prove that true power comes from character, not intimidation. The consequences faced by the bullies were real, but the growth, respect, and inspiration gained by Elijah and his peers were far greater. After the incident went viral and the initial tension at school settled, Elijah's life began to shift in ways he had never expected. The respect he had earned from peers and teachers created opportunities he hadn't imagined just a few weeks earlier. Invitations started to arrive, some from local organizations, others from nearby gyms and martial arts clubs. They wanted him to participate in exhibitions, to demonstrate discipline and skill, and to speak about handling challenges with courage and patience. At first, Elijah felt unsure. He had never sought attention, and the idea of speaking to groups of people or performing in front of strangers made him nervous. But he remembered the lessons he had learned through martial arts and life. Preparation, practice, and calm focus could make the unfamiliar manageable. He agreed to a few small events at first, starting with a local community center. The organizers were impressed not only by his martial arts skill, but by his humility. Elijah didn't move to impress or show dominance. He moved with control and grace, demonstrating the strength that came from years of practice and discipline. The audience was captivated, not just by the physical moves, but by the calm, confident way he carried himself. People saw more than a viral video. They saw a young man with purpose and integrity. Meanwhile, at school, life continued to evolve. Many students who had previously avoided Elijah now approached him with curiosity and respect. Some wanted to learn self-defense techniques. Others wanted advice on staying calm under pressure. Even students who had been indifferent or dismissive began to see him as a role model, someone whose quiet confidence could inspire them to be stronger in their own lives. Elijah welcomed these interactions. He shared his experiences, emphasizing patience, respect, and self-discipline. Rather than focusing on his viral fame, Elijah's academic life also flourished. Teachers, inspired by the courage and maturity he displayed, began offering more challenging projects and opportunities for leadership. He became a mentor for younger students who faced bullying or social challenges, helping them develop strategies to handle conflict with dignity. He didn't boast or act superior. He simply offered guidance from experience, letting his actions speak louder than words. Outside school, Elijah's family noticed the shift in his confidence and the opportunities that were coming his way. They were proud, but they reminded him to stay grounded and focused. "Opportunities are a gift, Elijah," his mother said one evening. "But what matters most is how you use them, not just the attention you get." Elijah took this advice to heart. Fame or recognition was never his goal. Growth, integrity, and making a positive impact were far more important. The viral attention also caught the eyes of a few scholarship committees. They had heard about his achievements in academics and martial arts, as well as the way he handled himself during the bullying incident. Invitations arrived for interviews, campus visits, and letters of recommendation. It was clear that his perseverance, intelligence, and discipline were opening doors that were previously unimaginable. Elijah felt proud, but he remained focused on continuing to work hard. He didn't see these as rewards for the viral video, but as opportunities earned through years of dedication and patience. Even the bullies began to change, though more slowly. Carter and his friends, once arrogant and dismissive, now approached interactions with caution. Some attempted to apologize, realizing too late that their cruelty had consequences beyond what they expected. Elijah accepted these gestures in some cases, but he didn't rush to forgive blindly. He understood that respect and trust must be rebuilt gradually, and that true change often comes from reflection and effort. Their regret was a reminder of the power of consequences, and Elijah's calm response reinforced the lesson that strength was shown through composure and integrity. The martial arts community became a significant part of Elijah's life during this time. He trained more seriously, learning advanced techniques and helping younger students develop their skills. His instructors admired not only his ability but also his patience and humility. They saw in him someone who had turned a personal challenge into a larger lesson for others, a student who could lead not through dominance, but through example. Each practice session became more than physical training. It became a time to reinforce discipline, focus, and the values that had guided him through bullying and adversity. Elijah also began to explore public speaking opportunities. Local schools and community centers invited him to share his story, emphasizing the importance of self-respect, discipline, and handling conflict without resorting to aggression. At first, speaking to large groups made him nervous, but he relied on the same principles he had learned in martial arts: steady breathing, focus, and preparation. His calm, thoughtful approach resonated with audiences both young and old. People saw a young man who had faced real challenges, handled them with maturity, and turned adversity into an opportunity to teach others. The viral video that once brought him sudden attention became a symbol, not of a fight, but of resilience and self-respect. Teachers referenced it in lessons about bullying, students shared it as an example of courage, and parents praised him for showing that even in difficult situations, integrity mattered more than retaliation. Elijah never focused on the fame. He focused on the lessons, the growth, and the chance to make a difference in others' lives. Social media continued to share his story, but Elijah didn't chase it. He used the attention as a way to connect with others, offering guidance, encouragement, and support to students who had faced bullying themselves. Messages arrived from across the country, students sharing their struggles, parents thanking him for being a positive role model, and even educators seeking advice on creating safer, more supportive school environments. Elijah responded thoughtfully, emphasizing that real strength comes from within, and that self-respect and patience are more powerful than anger or revenge. At school, his peers began to see a change not just in him, but in themselves. Some students who had previously followed the bully's lead started standing up for others, inspired by Elijah's example. Conversations about respect, kindness, and empathy became more common in classrooms. Teachers noticed the culture slowly shifting. The bullying that had once seemed unbreakable was losing its power. Elijah had influenced not just individuals but the broader environment, showing that one person's courage could ripple outward and create meaningful change. Elijah's parents continued to support him, but they also reminded him of the importance of balance. Fame and recognition could be fleeting, they said, but character and effort last a lifetime. He took these lessons seriously, maintaining his studies, training, and friendships while navigating the opportunities and attention that had come his way. He remained humble, never boasting, never seeking validation, and always focusing on his own growth and contribution. Even as Elijah's life changed, he kept perspective. He understood that his viral moment was a snapshot in time, a turning point, but not the entirety of his journey. The real transformation came from the years of discipline, patience, and self-respect that had led him to that moment. Every opportunity, every interaction, and every choice became part of a larger path that he continued to follow with dedication. By now, Elijah had become a quiet role model in his community. Younger students looked up to him, peers sought advice, and even the bullies, while still learning, had begun to reflect on their actions. Teachers respected him not just for his intelligence but for his composure and maturity. Community members admired his humility and resilience. Through all of this, Elijah remained grounded, practicing martial arts, studying diligently, and living by the principles that had guided him since childhood. The growth Elijah experienced wasn't just about recognition or opportunity. It was about understanding his own strength, the impact of his actions, and the value of patience and humility. He had faced bullying, adversity, and public scrutiny, yet he had emerged not only stronger but wiser. His story showed that courage isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet, consistent, and rooted in integrity. Even as opportunities continued to present themselves, speaking engagements, scholarships, and invitations to demonstrate martial arts, Elijah stayed focused on what truly mattered: learning, growing, and helping others. He didn't let attention distract him from his goals. Fame was temporary, but discipline, knowledge, and kindness were enduring. Each day he made choices that reinforced these values, inspiring others through example rather than words alone. Elijah's life had changed, but the core of who he was remained the same. He was still the quiet, disciplined student who loved learning and training. The difference was that now he had a platform to influence others, to share lessons he had learned through experience, and to show that respect, courage, and humility could overcome adversity. The viral video was only a chapter. The journey was far from over, and the impact of his integrity would continue to grow. By the end of this period, Elijah had transformed from a quiet student facing daily bullying into a respected figure within his school and community. He had inspired peers, gained recognition for his skills and character, and created a ripple effect of positive change. Yet through it all, he remained humble, grounded, and focused on what truly mattered: learning, growing, and living with integrity. His story was no longer just about a viral moment. It was about a young man's journey to strength, respect, and influence through patience, courage, and self-discipline. Life after the viral incident became a period of reflection, growth, and quiet achievement for Elijah. The video that once spread across social media and captured everyone's attention slowly faded from the front pages, but its impact on the school and his personal journey remained. He had proven that discipline, patience, and integrity mattered more than wealth, status, or popularity. The lessons he learned during the confrontation and the recognition that followed stayed with him, guiding every choice he made. Elijah continued to excel academically. His teachers, now fully aware of his dedication and character, offered him more challenging opportunities and projects. He thrived on this responsibility, always eager to learn and push himself further. Some students who had once mocked him now asked for his guidance, hoping to understand how he managed to stay calm under pressure and maintain his focus. Elijah never bragged or acted superior. He simply offered advice based on experience, emphasizing that resilience and self-control were skills anyone could develop if they were willing to work for them. The bullies, Carter and his friends, experienced their own long journey after the incident. Their initial humiliation had been public and painful, and they were forced to face the reality that cruelty has consequences. Some of them attempted awkward apologies, unsure how to express regret without seeming weak. Elijah accepted some of these apologies not to reward them, but to demonstrate that forgiveness and maturity were more powerful than holding on to resentment. Others who had once been part of their circle started to distance themselves, realizing they did not want to be associated with cruelty or arrogance.